All right. Oh, there we go.
I lost my controller.
All right, perfect. Audio is good. We will start right now then. All right, well, hello everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's program, Shawnee National Forest, History, Management, and Recreation. Join Shawnee National Forest Linda Hauser for a look at the past, present, and future of the state's only national forest. So without further ado, Linda Hauser.
Hi, thanks everyone. First, I just want to thank the Orlando Park Library for reaching out to us earlier in the year. It's great to be able to reach out to not just our Southern Illinois audiences where we're located, but of course, being a national forest, we like to reach everybody, especially here in our great state of Illinois. So like as Duke said, my name is Linda Hauser. I've been on the Shawnee for about 20 years. I'm originally from Northern Illinois, but came down to Southern Illinois after working for the Forest Service out in Colorado, and then working for the McHenry County Conservation District up in McHenry County, up near Orland Park. So been here for a long time, worked front desk, always done stuff with outreach and education, which is what I really enjoy to do, to kind of connect people to the forest. And so excited to teach you guys a little bit about the Shawnee. Hopefully some of you guys have been here before. And if not, hopefully this will inspire you to come down. So without further ado, I think we'll just go ahead and get started. So as you can see, can't really talk about the Shawnee National Forest without referencing our iconic site, Garden of the Gods. If you've seen any of, there's a new Illinois tourism campaign going on right now, and Governor Pritzker has put out a time for me to drive, and one of the places that they show, of course, is Garden of the Gods. So this is the iconic Camel Rock that you can see here, and then we were lucky enough in 2016 to be chosen to be put on the quarter. For the America the Beautiful quarter launch. So you can look through your quarters. Maybe you've got a little bit of the Shawnee National Forest in your pocket. Okay. Okay. So again, the Shawnee National Forest is located between the Mississippi and the Ohio rivers. We're just under 300,000 acres. So we're the largest public land holder here in Illinois, but we do have other public lands here in Illinois, specifically Southern Illinois. We have U.S. Fish and Wildlife lands. We have the Crab Orchard National Wildlife Refuge, as well as the Cypress Creek National Wildlife Refuge. They are actually under the Department of Interior. And on this map, it's kind of in that kind of lightish green color. We also have Illinois Department of Natural Resources. As you know, they administer all of our state parks. So down here, we've got Giant City State Park, which is probably one of our more popular ones. Up where you guys are, Starved Rock is a real popular state area. They're located all over, but again, they're administered by the state agency. And then of course, for here, we are the Forest Service, and we actually fall under the Department of Agriculture, which makes us a little bit different from the other natural resource agencies. But you guys up near Orland Park actually have a, close that, actually have a forest up where you are. Not a forest, I'm sorry, a tallgrass prairie, Midewin National Tallgrass Prairie. They're actually celebrating their 25th year. They were established back in 1996. Midewin is a really cool site. It's a restored tallgrass prairie, and it actually is on the grounds of the old Joliet Arsenal. So there's all sorts of old bunkers there, but they've got great hiking, really great for biking, especially if you like it nice and flat. And of course, they've got bison, who I heard just had some babies. So it's a really cool place to go and explore. And I encourage you guys to get out there and check it out if you have not been there already. So we do have 2 Forest Service administered sites here in Illinois. They also have a great visitor center, which is great if you've got kids to go and explore a little bit also. So the one thing we are not is we are not a Shawnee Park. So we are not the National Park Service. And of course, all these agencies, people all get us confused. But the National Park Service, like Fish and Wildlife, is actually under the Department of Interior. So just a little bit different mottos or missions that they have, but we all are about conservation and preservation. So specifically, the Forest Service mission is to sustain the health, the diversity, and the productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands to meet the needs of present and future generations. And then our motto is caring for the land and serving people. Can't get more simple than that. So how exactly do we do that? Well, we have to kind of go back a little bit and learn a little bit about how the Forest Service actually came to be. We're actually an over 100-year-old agency. So before the Forest Service came into being, federal forest management actually dates back to about 1876, when Congress created an Office of Special Agent in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and to start assessing the quality and conditions of forests in the United States. And this was really mostly a Western thing. And then in 1881, the department expanded the office into the Division of Forestry. And then about a decade later, Congress passed the Forest Reserve Act, and that basically authorized the federal government to start buying up some of these lands that were out there. And then he actually put them under the Forest Service. Gifford Pinchot who's pictured here, he was a forester, and he was actually appointed as the first chief of the Forest Service. And he pretty much believed that the public lands are for really the greatest good for the greatest number. And he believed in wise use of the land. And so that's how the Forest Service really got started, and was really started and got signed off by the President Theodore Roosevelt at the time, who of course was a huge outdoor advocate. If you're interested in learning more about the history of the Forest Service specifically, there's a great video that's called The Greatest Good. It came out during our centennial celebration back in 2005. But it's a really good historical, not quite Ken Burns good, but it is good, and it gives you a lot of the history of the Forest Service. So now for a little math. So now the Forest Service across the country, we are 155 national forests. We have 20 national grasslands, and so we're lucky here in Illinois to claim at least one of those. We have 20 research and experimental forests, and all of these together make up 191 million acres of public land that is administered by the USDA Forest Service. So it's really an agency that has a wide reach. We've got a lot of really unique places. And the one thing I don't think people realize is that research branch. There's a whole branch of the Forest Service that just focuses on research, and it's a really pretty exciting thing. There's stations all over the country, and so just lots of exciting things happening with the Forest Service. So what is the Forest Service? You saw our motto, you saw our mission. So basically it's managed for a lot of different uses. So multiple uses like timber. We have wilderness areas. We do have mining historically and currently. Water is a really important resource that we manage for, and those watersheds that the forests fall into. Grazing will happen on a variety of forests. Of course, we manage for the wildlife. And then of course, recreation, which is that we all can go out, connect with nature, do the things we like to do outdoors, and these places are set aside to allow us to enjoy. So unlike the other natural resource agencies, we definitely are a conservation agency where we do have use of the land. Like I said, it's wise use, and we look at all aspects of use, again, for the greatest good for the greatest number. So kind of specifically now, getting into the Shawnee National Forest, we officially became a forest on September 6th in 1939. So we just celebrated our 80th anniversary back in 2019. And it became official during the Franklin Delano Roosevelt New Deal era when he was president. But really, how do we get here? We have to go back a little bit, because our story here, especially because we're kind of part of the Eastern Forest, is a little bit different from when forests got established out west. So for here in Southern Illinois, you know, in the 1800s, as settlers were starting to expand further and further west from the east, a lot of the population were starting to come from the Carolinas, Kentucky, Tennessee. The land here in Southern Illinois was very similar. And it reminded them of the Appalachian mountain areas, very rolling hills, kind of rugged. And of course, they were attracted to the timber so that they can establish. So they would travel through different routes, mostly following the rivers, the Cumberland River, the Tennessee River, the Wilderness Road, as they called it, that came up through Indiana and here in Illinois. And again, Southern Illinois falls between the Shawnee Hills and the Illinois Ozarks. So these settlers came, and they came and started doing agriculture. They brought their animals, so a lot of their cattle, their hog farming, their sheep, a lot of it was free range. So they would get into the woods. They would clear some of the land for their orchards or their large family gardens. And of course, they needed that wood for building their log houses, for cooking, for heating. So it was a very attractive area to start settling in. So as time went on, more into much of the 19th and early 20th century, you know, things started to become a lot more industrialized. So land was being cleared in Southern Illinois for lots of different purposes. So we had the Gallatin Saline Reserve. There were actually salt works here in Southern Illinois, and they needed wooden pipes and fuel for salt works. So timber was taken for that. The Illinois Iron Furnace that you can see a picture of there down in your bottom right-hand side. Fuel was needed. This was to manufacture charcoal to fuel this furnace. The steamships that were running up and down the Mississippi and the Ohio rivers, that was fueled by fuel, of course, from timber. So that was another reason that the land was cleared. Railroad ties. Railroads were starting to be built all across the country, and as well as mining was very popular, and they needed that wood to basically prop up and support the coal mines. At this time, there was probably about 250 or so sawmills and cooperages, which those were the guys that made like the wooden baskets and things for alcohol and whatnot. But of course, the main way or reason that land was cleared was for agriculture. So at this point, you still had 99% of the men, you know, considering themselves farmers, but there was still a lot of clearing going on during this industrial time. So as you can see from these historical pictures, it definitely took a toll on the land, and fairly quickly. So Pope, Jackson, and Massac County are three of the southern counties. The Shawnee National Forest currently is kind of, we cover 13 counties down in this most southern part. So these are kind of scattered throughout the southern part. But you can see the erosion that the farm fields took, and from clearing off all that timber. So at this point, the federal government, the state of Illinois actually asked the federal government to step in and to start buying some of this highly eroded land, because there really wasn't much else they could do with it, and try to start a restoration process and start getting the timber put back on. So basically what was happening, of course, this just wasn't farmable anymore. So crop production went way down. they couldn't even grow potatoes or hold red clover or anything that they used to keep the soil in place. It was just too damaged. Obviously, the topsoil is gone, and unfortunately, what this caused was that a lot of erosion going into streams, rivers, including the Ohio and the Mississippi. So even back then, they realized that they were disturbing or polluting those waterways, those watersheds, which of course everybody was dependent on. And then of course, during this time, a lot of families started selling their farms and they were seeking work in other areas, moving out to more urban areas. So during this time, the Weeks Act of 1911 was passed. And this was a really, really important piece of legislation, especially for lands out east. Because again, like I said, when the Forest Service was established, it was really a focus on snatching up that land out west and putting it into federal ownership. But the Weeks Act was actually named for Massachusetts Congressman John Weeks. And this was actually something that came a long time into being. They debated for it for decades, but basically they wanted some kind of legislation that would allow the federal government to not just buy the good stuff, but they actually to buy up some of this eroded land, some of this denuded land that kind of nobody else really could do anything with. And that's really what the Weeks Act legislation allowed the federal government to start to do. Now, there was some land out west. If you can look at this map, those dark areas out west are also included in the Weeks Act. But as you can see, it was very heavily an eastern United States piece of legislation that made the huge difference. So this it really had a profound effect on what the current forests look like now today, which of course provide lots of clean water, wildlife, recreation, forest products, and all other sorts of goods and services. And it really made the National Forest System truly national because now forests were being established out east. Oh, there was a quote. So when this law was passed, basically it authorized the Secretary of Agriculture to, quote, examine, locate, and purchase such forested, cut over, or denuded lands within the watersheds of navigable streams as in his judgment may be necessary to the regulation of the flow of navigable streams or for the production of timber. So timber was still on the mind, but also preserving those watersheds was really important, which to me was very forward thinking during this time. So there was a lot of research that was going on already. The Forest Service was already interested in Illinois and in the timber that was still there and at once was. So there was all sorts of foresters that were here, a lot of them through the universities that were already doing inventories on what was happening or what was still left here in Southern Illinois. And so there was this report that was put together by a Forest Service employee named William Barker. And the preliminary report basically said that, these lands need to be purchased and the forest established for three main things, as you can see listed here. So preventing erosion, that was obviously, as you saw from those pictures, a real big concern. Timber production, once again, to get these places replanted. And then these demonstration areas where they can actually do experiments and study erosion and that type of thing. Because like I said, most of these studies were being done through universities. And actually back in the Hoover administration, the chief of the Forest Service, they actually presented that report and it was refused. This was back in about 1931 because there was a lack of funds. So they weren't quite ready to make it a national forest quite yet. But then as time went on, President Roosevelt became into office, and this was about in the early 30s. And as part of the New Deal, the purchase of lands was approved in about 1933. And so this immediately solved two problems. And it quickly took land out of cultivation so that they could start to restore the land through planting pine and to stop the cultivation. but also it poured a lot of cash into these really pretty economically depressed areas. And so Southern Illinois became kind of the largest continuous wooded tract of land here in Illinois. And then after that, things kind of started to go pretty quickly. John Wernham, he was sent to start acquiring land here in Southern Illinois. And this is, again, part of the New Deal era. So there was a 20-man cruising crew that was sent. There were 13 conservation civilian corps camps that were set up. So you can see in that top left-hand corner, that's a picture of one of the camps. I mean, these were huge establishments. And a lot of the guys that were the CCC enrollees were World War I veterans and younger. And so these guys were set out and they did so many things to get this area reestablished. They did everything from, a lot of it initially was road construction because there was really not great ways to get around. And so they constructed a lot of roads. They built fire towers, as you see here. They actually were the fire crews and they would man the lookouts. You can see there's a crew going out in that bottom left-hand corner. They built recreation areas. Some of the buildings we still have here on the Shawnee, they're still standing strong, like some of our picnic pavilions and things like that. They collected nuts for tree planting. They quarried gravel. They built bridges, strung telephone line. And a lot of those early restoration efforts, again, were to control erosion, flood control in addition. And the big thing that these guys did to get started is they planted pine, mostly shortleaf pine and pitch pine plantations. And the reason they chose pine is pine grows very quickly. And so what they wanted to do is get these trees planted, get those roots to keep the soil in place to prevent erosion. So driving around now here in Southern Illinois, you'll see all sorts of pine stands. And those are the remnants from the CCC era when they planted these pines to get that erosion under control. So about the same time, there was a gentleman, Lindolf Oscar Trigg, that you can see pictured here. And this guy was a news reporter that lived here in Southern Illinois. And he just was really, he just loved Southern Illinois. He knew it had a lot of very unique places just because of the way the landscape was. And so he had this idea to kind of boost the local economy and doing it through tourism. And so what he did is he would get these vehicles like you see there, and he would gather family and friends, and eventually he would start to advertise out to more local politicians and people that he felt could make a difference. And he would do tours across Southern Illinois and bring them to the hot spots back in the day. So places like Garden of the Gods and Bellsmith Springs, ones that have names now that didn't before we became a forest. So they would camp along the way. They would have lunch along the way. And this was like a whole big excursion that people would join. And eventually it got regional interest, then it got national interest. But I love this quote that he has on here, which I think is still very pertinent today. There are times when every man must lay aside his serious and perplexing problems and play a little. These Ozark tours afford him that relaxation, takes his mind off his worries, and shows him the way to more happiness and rest of mind. These trips will assist you in balancing the mental budget. Love that last line. We could all use a little bit of balancing our mental budget, I think. So some things haven't changed. So anyway, these were very popular, and there's no doubt that these tours and the people he had on them and the influence they had helped the Shawnee become the Shawnee National Forest, because it was shortly thereafter when he started these tours that the Shawnee National Forest was established, again, as you saw at the previous slide or earlier slide, in 1939. What's really neat, and to kind of bring us up to the current day, our archaeologists, we have two of them on the forest, they actually started to recreate the Ozark tours. Unfortunately, COVID kind of put them a little bit on the back burner, but I think we're going to be starting them up again. So every fall and spring, in partnership with some of the local tourism agencies, they actually do Ozark Tours. So we get a bus and people sign up. They get a t-shirt, they get a program, and they get a tour on the forest. And we do different themes. So one year it was touring the different waterfalls and wildflowers around Southern Illinois. So that was a spring one. Another one they did is they toured all of the different stone forts. So kind of a historical tour. So it's kind of neat how we've kind of revised these with a little bit different purpose, but it's still to connect people to the land, connect people to what makes the Shawnee, and get people out to these places that maybe they haven't been to before, or maybe aren't comfortable going by themselves. So if you're ever interested, these are running usually every spring and fall. It's just kind of a unique way to get to see some places on the Shawnee that maybe you didn't get to before. And again, lots of history. If you like history, we tend to focus on that because that's what our partners like also. So again, staying in the present, like I said, we are now the Shawnee National Forest. So we're going to kind of skip way ahead and kind of get a little bit now more into the management, how we do what we do, or how we manage what we have now. So the management can really be best explained by a kind of a campaign. This is kind of a multi-agency campaign, but it just kind of explains it really well, because this is not just a Southern Illinois issue. This is an issue with a lot of different private land holdings, state land holdings, really around the Midwest. The fact that we're losing a lot of our historical forests. So basically, forests here in Southern Illinois, in a lot of places, we're kind of an oak hickory dominant forest for thousands and thousands of years. And the benefit of that is because your oaks and hickories provide mast or food for lots of different wildlife. So you've got the trees, you've got the food, you've got the wildlife. It just kind of all goes together well. But because of lack of management, lack of fire, and management in terms of having some forest thinning, our forest canopy has gotten really, really thick. In other words, when you go visit a forest, the idea is that you let the sunshine in. There should be sunlight hitting that forest floor. And when the forests aren't managed, we don't get in there and thin some of the trees and or get some fire in there to let the oaks and the hickory seedlings get in there. We get more of a shade dominated forest, which are our maples and our beeches. And that's kind of what we're seeing here in Southern Illinois. And so the management includes a few different things, but it's a kind of a holistic approach, this let the sunshine in concept, because it's one thing to manage on our forest, but then private landowners, state, other agencies that have public land, it's kind of important that we're kind of all on the same page and do it together. Otherwise, it's not going to work just to have it in little pockets. So, the idea is the sun hits the forest floor. That's going to allow flowers and shrubs and grasses to grow. That attracts insects and pollinators. That in turn is going to attract your birds and your other wildlife for food, but also for cover and nesting. It also, having an open forest actually creates more dead and down wood, which is important for that soil rejuvenation, as well as for the insects to break down, which of course attracts the wildlife, etc., as the circle of life goes round and round. And so basically scientists believe that here in the central Midwest, that our forest may be the first to convert to kind of this maple beech if we don't actually do a little bit more management. Because even if you look back at data back to the 1980s, the oak hickory was so much more higher than it is today. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So again, what we're trying to do right now is do some selective removal and thinning. Specifically, what we're trying to thin is those pine trees that were planted back in the CCC. Again, pine is not native here in Southern Illinois. There is one native pine, which is the shortleaf pine, which grows naturally in a couple of our natural areas, LaRue Pine Hills and a little bit farther up the Mississippi River. But we're not a really heavy pine area. So taking out some of those pine planted and rejuvenated from the CCC, like I said, they did their job. They held down that soil, taking out some of those and following it up with some oak hickory regeneration. And also following that up with prescribed fire. We've got a really active prescribed fire program. And again, so this will kind of open things up, as I explained before, for that forest floor so that we can make it attractive and make good habitat for all of the wildlife. So how do we do that? So basically through process of selective pine removal, as I mentioned before, here we've got someone going out and just marking timber. And this is to kind of just open up the canopy. So there's definitely science behind how they mark these trees and which ones they take. They don't just take all the biggest or all the smallest. There's a good variety and a lot of math that goes into it. So if you have any kids that are mathematicians, they should become a forester. There's a lot of math in there. And then of course, these areas go out for bid. And so you've got the companies that will come out and take out the logs that we have already pre-marked. And just for a really good, a good example, this is a great picture. It's a little bit blurry. We need to get a better one, but you kind of can get an idea of what we mean by let the sun shine in. So this is a picture of a harvest, and you can probably tell, but the harvest happened on the left-hand side of the road. You can see that sunshine hitting the forest floor. You see all sorts of different sized trees. It actually will allow those trees, because now they have more space to grow. So instead of getting short or skinny, spindly trees that grow straight up, they've got some more space to spread out. And you can see on the right-hand side, this side of the road has yet to be harvested. So just even seeing this picture, you can see the difference. You can see it's better for the habitat itself, but even if you just think about recreating, obviously you want something that's a little bit more of an open forest. And then it's really important in some instances to follow that up with some kind of prescribed burning. We have a really active prescribed fire program here in Southern Illinois, not only on forests, but state agencies, other federal agencies, as well as partnerships with a lot of private landowners. As you saw from that initial map, if you remember, we are really spread out in Southern Illinois. I mean, there's a lot of people who have quote unquote the Shawnee in their backyard. So it's important that we get everybody on board and make sure that we're communicating with why and how we're doing this. So our fire season is in the fall and in the spring, of course. So that's when we can go in. Basically, those fires, they stimulate that native growth. You know, those oaks like that fire, and so that allows them to take hold and have those seedlings come up, since they're outcompeted most of the time by those maples and those beeches. It's overall going to improve the habitat, because you're going to help in some cases to get rid of the invasive species. It also will, like I said, just improve habitat overall. So on average, you know, we probably, like in the past 10 years, we probably burnt about 10,000 acres a year. And that's in the forest, as well as you see that bottom picture is more of the open lands. We do have some open lands that we manage, which is really important for those ground nesting birds and things like that need that, don't need that forest. They want that open land. Now, in terms of wildfire, you know, because we're a deciduous forest, we don't have fires like they do out west, of course. You know, being deciduous, we're always a little bit more moist, but that's not to say we don't have wildfires. Unfortunately, sometimes the Smokey Bear message doesn't even get around here, and people leave campfires, or maybe you know, they're burning their own field, or maybe burning something else, and you know, the fire gets on Forest Service. But really, I would say we only average about anywhere between 10 to 20 wildfires a year, and most of those are probably only a few acres. You know, in a year, at the most, we might have like 200, 260 acres or so, and that's for the whole entire year encompassing a wildfire. So pretty small for the most part. But again, we work really well in conjunction with the other, the local fire departments, help to train them for wildland firefighting, which is obviously different from in the city, and just some really good partnerships that are involved with our prescribed burn program. Department of Natural Resources, and then the Southern Illinois Prescribed Burn Association, which actually helps a lot of private landowners get this accomplished so they can, if they're looking to improve habitat on their land, a lot of them might have their land in a program where they have to do some management. And so we've got agencies down there that will help them on the private land. And then of course we do a lot of training because most of our firefighters after our season, they will go out west for to help with the fires out west during the summer. And we train a lot of the firefighters in the different agencies, as well as retired Forest Service personnel and that type of thing to be deployed out west or for other incidents. So, you know, that's a couple examples of management, but there's so much more that goes into it besides just cutting timber and burning. There's so much that goes into it. So anytime we're going to do any type of physical management on the ground, we have to do, even if it's putting in a new trail, there's all sorts of monitoring that occurs. And so that's when our other people in the Forest Service come into play. So we have botanists that monitor obviously the plants, but specifically endangered threatened plants like Mead's milkweed, that we want to make sure that if we have populations, that we're not going to encroach upon those, as well as they do a lot of our invasive species inventory. A lot of our wildlife management really falls with Department of Natural Resources or Fish and Wildlife. And most of it, you know, it's really managing the habitat. You manage the habitat, then you're managing wildlife. But there are some species that we do specifically monitor for because we are mandated to, and one of them are bats. We have a couple of endangered bats, the gray bat and the Indiana bat, and with white nose syndrome, which of course is a fungus that has been affecting bat populations, unfortunately now across the country. We do some pretty active bat management. That's mostly, well, it's going to be starting up here in the summer when they're the most active. You can see that they're getting ready to do that. I'm probably covering that up, but we have archaeologists, as I mentioned before. So basically looking for cultural sites of any sort, Native American sites. We also have some other ones that I'll touch base on. Wilderness monitoring. We are mandated by Congress to monitor our wilderness areas. And then of course we've got soils, hydrology, just all sorts of different ologists that do what they do before we actually do any kind of management to make sure that we are doing it the best, backing it up by science and not disturbing anything like threatened endangered species or cultural sites. And then of course, as I mentioned way at the beginning, that was all about caring for the land. And now this is about serving people. So another big part of what we do is try to engage people, just like I'm doing with this Zoom presentation. I mean, but we try to get out into communities, meet people where they're at. We are part of the community down here, as well as you know, the states surrounding us. So we get into community events, obviously parades. We celebrated Smokey's 75th birthday back in 2019. We get into classrooms and do field trips with kids. We do teachers workshops. We've got our timber folks helping this teacher here in the center, teaching them about forestry, the how and why that we get out there and do what I explained before. It's a great thing for teachers to incorporate into their classrooms. You know, what do we learn a map for? Well, you can become a forester. And then of course we are the keepers of Smokey Bear and Woodsy Owl. Woodsy Owl is celebrating his 50th birthday this year. So it's kind of a big deal for Woodsy. Hopefully people know who Woodsy is. Not as popular as Smokey Bear. Maybe his campaign just didn't get out as much, but he used to be give a hoot, don't pollute. And now he's lend a hand, care for the land. So we'll be getting woodsy out a lot, hopefully this year. But basically the idea with serving people and connecting them with the forest is, we have to let people know what we're doing. I mean, there's no point in going and managing and doing what we do unless we have people getting out in their forests, learning the why we do it, and hoping they get out and recreate and enjoy it. We have to tell our story. And then none of this would really be possible, to be quite honest, without our volunteers. We have a really strong volunteer program that help us with management, also just help us with the day-to-day stuff. And it's really a win-win. A lot of the volunteers that we get are groups that are looking for service projects for one reason or another. This center group here that's collecting garbage on a hillside at the Root Pine Hills, this is actually a group of kids from Boston University. They've been coming out every spring for their alternative spring break. So instead of going down to the beach in Florida, they come out to the Shawnee and we do service projects with them. They pick up garbage, they help us with trail maintenance, help us with signs, just all sorts of things, pulling invasive species. Down in the left corner there, around the Lusk Creek sign, this is actually a group out of Chicago. They're called Green Corps. And these are older adults that are getting back into the workforce. They're learning forestry or other skills in and around like the forest preserves and park districts up in the Chicagoland area. But we've started a partnership with them where they actually come down to the Shawnee and they spend a week or so doing trail maintenance and taking it up a notch and getting to do some different things and going to wilderness areas and places. So they've been a huge help these last few years. We also have AmeriCorps and CCC. I think I'm covering their pack-in stock. So when we have to do trail maintenance out in wilderness, we actually have to use mules. We can't go in there with chainsaws or anything on wheels. And so that's a unique opportunity for them, for these young people to get out and work around pack stock. And they're usually called out to do not only help with other agencies, but also do, if there's hurricanes, anything like that, help the Red Cross. Really great organization, getting these kids out, almost like a home, kind of like a national Peace Corps, in other words, so they stay in the United States, but they serve all over. And then we even have people paint signs. We have a group called Jeep and Shawnee. They love to ride some of the roads in their Jeeps, but they turn around and do all sorts of volunteer stuff for us. In this case, they got families out here painting signs. And then we just have individuals. We got a couple people helping in our pollinator garden up in the corner there. They're just master naturalists. They just want to do some volunteering. So they come out and just help the forest when they can. And again, as you can see, we average about 10,000 hours per year. So it's just a great way to connect people. We get some great work out of them, and they all want to give back. So it's just great. We just can't say enough about our volunteers. So what does that mean for you though? So what can we do? Oh shoot, I think I'm covering up this young man there, which is good because he has a tiny little fish. It's from one of our fishing derbies. And if I'm supposed to advertise fishing, I should have had somebody with a really big fish. Anyway, so what can you do when you come to the Shawnee yourself? So we've got lots of lakes and streams and creeks for fishing. Hunting is a really popular activity, whether you want to go for deer or turkey. We're open for all the seasons. Don't need a special permit as long as you've got your license through the Department of Natural Resources. You're good to go on federal lands. All sorts of water activities. Kayaking is really taken off, and canoeing, as well as we've got a lot of larger lakes that are administered by the Department of Natural Resources, but a lot of Forest Service kind of is adjacent to them. On Kincaid Lake, Cedar Lake, where you can have 10 horsepower motors or bigger on some of the bigger lakes. Horseback riding is very popular. We've got a lot of horse hiker designated trails. There's a lot of private horse camps. We don't have horses you can ride, but you can either BYO, bring your own horse, or there are, like Giant City does have a stable where you can have horses. But so we definitely share the trails with them. It's just kind of a neat way to get out and see the forest. And then, of course, hiking, horseback riding, and hot off the presses, we have our first official designated mountain bike trails. Before these trails went in at Lake Glendale, we did not have any designated mountain bike trails. We had trails people rode bikes on that weren't designated, and they basically had to stick to forest roads and things like that. But this was actually a partnership with the Department of Natural Resources. I don't know if you can see at the bottom of that map, the trail actually goes from Dixon Springs State Park, and the red lines lead you up to Lake Glendale, which is one of our sites. It's actually concessionaire run, but they've got a beach, they've got the trails, they've got a campground, and now they've got mountain biking. So really exciting that we've got some established mountain bike trails for that group. They historically have always done, there's always been some rides that have happened on there. And so we just felt it was time we needed to establish some trails for our mountain bike community. And then of course we've got camping. So we've got a variety of campgrounds. There's 8 different campgrounds that we maintain. Most of them are what we can consider primitive. Most of them don't have electricity. If you want to bring an RV, you'd have to have your own generator. But they're great sites. We have 2 that are operated by concessionaire. So we have some that do have electricity. Some of them are open year round, some of them are just seasonal. But the thing about our campgrounds is we don't take reservations. It's all first come, first serve. So that's something a little bit different. But the other thing that is kind of unique about when you come to the Forest Service, and if you're into this kind of thing, you can do dispersed camping. And what that means is you don't have to be in a campground to camp. You can hike on a trail, and you can get off into the woods, and you can pitch a tent somewhere. Generally, you're going to be 150 feet from a stream or from the trail. Obviously, you don't want people walking through your campsite anywhere. And of course, this is free, which always makes it nice. So a lot of people like to do backpacking, and we do allow dispersed camping as opposed to state parks and other areas that don't allow that. Definitely need to be a little more adventurous and know your way around things a little bit. But as with all sorts of recreation and doing dispersed camping and campgrounds, we definitely want everyone to be like a Bigfoot and leave no trace. As you can see, Bigfoot's been doing it for years. So we always encourage people to leave no trace no matter where they go, and be a Bigfoot. So what are some of the special areas that we have here? So just some larger categories. So we have designated wilderness, and this is not just nice places. This is wilderness with a capital W. This is congressionally designated wilderness areas that we have to manage a certain way in terms of making sure that we provide backcountry experiences, solitude, untrammeled experiences. These areas are set aside because they're unique, they're special, they've got geological, biological, unique features to them. And they're definitely places where you can actually feel like you can get away. Like I said, we've got 7. Crab Orchard actually manages one, the Wildlife Refuge. There's 8 in Southern Illinois. There's no special permits required to visit wilderness areas. We've got shorter trails, longer trails, and of course, great places to do that dispersed camping if that's something that you're interested in. Other unique areas, or special places, we have natural areas, which these are found all throughout Illinois. And so these are just, again, areas set aside because they have some kind of unique, whether it's geology, biology, unique species that are there. And probably the most, I don't know if the most popular, but probably the most unique one we have down here is one in the LaRue Pine Hills Research Natural Area. Now, this is nationally designated a research natural area, and it is because it is where there is a quote unquote, it's called Snake Road, but it's a Forest Service road that's closed biannually specifically for snake and amphibian migration. It's in this very unique location where we get the northernmost species from the south and the southernmost species from the north. And it's just this great area where you'll see all sorts of diversity, flowers, obviously amphibians and reptiles. Just a really great place. But we close this road annual because they migrate, the snakes specifically migrate from the hills in the spring. They cross this road and they go down to the swamp area, and then they reverse it in the fall where they're going to migrate through. Well, back in the 70s, there was a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of snakes getting run over. And so the road, excuse me, the road is closed just a couple miles, and it's at the base of a bluff. Excuse me a second. And so this keeps the great place to get to see this unique area, as well as to prevent wildlife from dying, because there are some endangered and threatened snakes down there. So very unique area to go. And no, it's not like the mass migration, like, you know, it's you want to go on a sunny day, you want to go afternoon, and hopefully you'll get to see a few things. It's a very unique area. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the, obviously, the historical and cultural sites. I mean, I covered history, but obviously I covered European history. There is so much history there here that goes farther back than that. A lot of Native American sites that we have here on the Shawnee National Forest. Stone forts, rock art that you can see down here, kind of in the bottom right. That's at a site called Millstone Bluff, where you can actually see the rock art. Trail of Tears, the Cherokee Indians that came through here, came through Southern Illinois. There's Underground Railroad sites where we know that they were using areas as part of the Underground Railroad to get African Americans from the South up the north to freedom. There's actually an African American freed slave community called Miller's Grove. You can see the gravestone here. And of course, a little bit more modern history, the iron furnace, which I mentioned before, which is still standing, and we've interpreted it. And then under where I am, this Jonesboro is here in Southern Illinois, and that is the site of the third Lincoln Douglas debate. And it's actually just a site in town near our Forest Service office. It's more of a city park. It's a very unique Forest Service site because it's just got a pavilion, it's got a gazebo, it's got a nice little trail around the pond, but it's got a lot of really neat history too. So lots of history and culture if that's what you enjoy. But really what makes Southern Illinois so interesting and different from the rest of Illinois, as you know, Illinois is a prairie state. That's why the pioneers came here. They weren't interested in the prairie land as much as they wanted that timber way back when, although the agricultural land is a little bit better as you get farther north. But down here, you can see we've actually got 4 natural divisions in Illinois coming together. You've got the Ozarks there in red, the lower Mississippi River bottomlands in that purple, the Shawnee Hills, and the coastal plain. So this just makes for a really diverse type of ecosystems. Again, lots of geology, since the glaciers didn't make it down this far. And just what really makes, the Shawnee very unique and not what you think of when you think of Illinois. So when should you come and visit? Because now hopefully I've inspired you that you need to get down here. So really all the seasons are good. I'm going to be honest with you. So spring. So I guess what you can say about spring is, yes, sometimes it rains, but the good thing about rain is you're going to get seasonal waterfalls. Unfortunately, a lot of people come down here in the summer and they think they're going to see waterfalls, and we are seasonal waterfalls. So you actually want to come down when it rains, because then you can head out with your camera and you will get some awesome waterfall pictures, as they will spring up after a good spring rain, which of course brings all the wildflowers. So spring is actually a great time to come. And of course, you've got great temperatures too. So definitely a vote for spring. Summer, you can't beat traveling in the summer. We've got a couple of beaches. This is Pounds Hollow Beach. That's pictured there up on the left. We also have Lake Glendale Beach that I mentioned before. The kayak is on Cedar Lake, which is a great little lake. It's only a 10 horsepower, so it's really popular for canoes and kayaking. And then of course, summertime, you can't, beat breaking out the tent or the RV and just coming camping at one of our campsites, or maybe, feeling adventurous and doing some dispersed camping. Fall, I mean, The pictures kind of say it all. Fall is a great time to come. The colors are just spectacular no matter where you go. Really starting the end of September and running through that beginning of November, kind of weather dependent, what happened the rest of the year. Little Grand Canyon is there on the left-hand side of your screen. That's a great trail kind of on the west side of the forest. And then the larger picture, I believe, is Rim Rock, which is a great historical trail that you can go on and just brings you down into some beautiful, beautiful scenery. But with the colors come the crowds, I will say. Definitely a busy time for the Shawnee. So if you don't like crowds, maybe not the fall, or just fall in some of those getaway places that not everyone else knows about. And then I would even argue that winter's a great time to come. Keep in mind, we're probably about 10 to 15 degrees warmer than Chicagoland. With the leaf off, that brings out all of the geology. And as you can see, we do get some snow. We do get some cold temperatures. Makes it for some beautiful hiking in and of itself. Frozen waterfalls. And the real good thing about winter is you don't have ticks, you don't have poison ivy, and those snakes are hibernating. So you have that if none of those things are things that you want to come down for. So one thing to keep in mind before you hit the road and travel, no matter where you're going to go, if you come to the forest or really anywhere across the country, especially when you're going to go to federal, if you're not aware, there's the America the Beautiful program, and these are passes that you can buy. So it waives entrance fees for you to go and visit, whether you for any place that charges an entrance fee. So most of those are going to be Park Service. So the annual fee is for anybody. It's $80 and it's good for a year. Well, if you hit a few national parks, you're going to get your money's worth. The senior pass are for 62 and older. There's an annual, and then there's a lifetime pass. The access pass are for those with disabilities. You just have to show permanent disability, some kind of paperwork, and that's a lifetime pass, as is the senior. Military pass is somewhat new, so that's for current military members, veterans, as well as Gold Star families, so people that have had someone that they've lost due to military service. And then the volunteer pass is for people who have put in at least 250 hours. So that's why that win-win for those volunteers that come out. They can get a volunteer pass, and that they get one of those for the year. And then in the bottom corner, if anyone has any fourth graders, you can get a fourth grade pass, and that's good for their school year. So fourth graders, right now, their pass would be good through the end of August. End of August 30th. And then new fourth graders start at September 1st. So it's just kind of cool just to get the pass. Now, the thing about the Shawnee, we don't charge for anything. So we're free, with the exception of the campgrounds. We don't charge any fees, but so these are going to be more useful if you go, other places that may charge a fee. And of course, this is just for federal lands. And so you can go to, some of our offices are still closed. Hopefully we'll be opening soon. But if you go to the website here, this is the U.S. Geological Survey. You can actually purchase the passes from there. So that website will get you more information on those. So Shawnee National Forest, we're closer than you think. So as you can see, all the big cities, but then there's Orland Park. It's only 324 miles. So, you're looking at a nice long weekend. And if that doesn't tempt you, the next solar eclipse will be coming right through Southern Illinois on April 8th, 2024. So if you missed the last one, make plans to come down for this one, because it is something not to be missed in your lifetime if we're going to be this close to one. So that's all I have. This is our website where I can encourage you to go. If you want more information about the Shawnee, you can download specific maps for our trails. You can get the office phone numbers if you want to call and talk to somebody before you come and visit. And it's got a lot of the good history information there as well. I also encourage you to go ahead and you can go to the tourism sites in Southern Illinois. Those are great places to go to figure out other places to stay. There's lots of good ecotourism down here. So again, thank you, and hopefully you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you so much, Linda, for that presentation. I do want to just give a reminder slash, just a little information that Linda has sent the Orland Park Library a box of goodies. So we have bookmarks, maps, and other items, and we should be handing those out within the coming weeks. So if you want to just ask the Adult Services Desk, they should be able to direct you to those items. And we will open it up for questions if anybody has questions for Linda.
Oh, you're welcome for the presentation. I'm anxious for you to come down.
Oh, no problem. And we'll just give it a couple minutes. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat.
I'd be curious to know if anyone has actually been to the Shawnee before. Or were they learning, was this all kind of new? And don't be embarrassed if you haven't. But hopefully you guys can get to the library and pick up some of the stuff and get you inspired to hit the road and come see some new places in Illinois. Oh, motorcycle riding, that's pretty popular down here too. Good way to get out on those roads and get to see stuff. Yes, the camping is great. Like I said, all seasons. I especially like the spring and the fall. Again, like I said, it's first come, first serve, but for the most part, you shouldn't have too hard of a time getting sites. Holiday weekends might be a little tricky, but I always encourage people to come a little bit during those off times. Oh, heck, even if you can come during the week, and you can kind of get some of the places to yourself. So definitely check it out. But there's also a lot of other camping that, with the other agencies, as well as, there's a lot of private campgrounds too. Oh, can you repeat what you said about RVs? Yeah, so most of our sites are primitive in that we don't have electricity there. So there's going to be a pit toilet, but there won't be any place to hook up. But you can bring an RV. You would just have to run a generator. But we do have 2 campgrounds that do have electricity. One of them is Lake Glendale, and the other one is we have a loop at Pounds Hollow. So both of those are east of 57. If you come down 57 from Chicagoland, they're going to be on the east. But like I said, there's a lot of other private state campgrounds that have electricity if that's what you need. And then the Shawnee's spread out all over, so you can adventure that way. Rock formations, yes, hopefully you saw a lot of those in the presentation. Obviously the famous one being Camel Rock, but on that trail, that's only a quarter of a mile, but you can actually get into the wilderness, and there's one that's called Anvil Rocks. It looks like an anvil. I can remember back to Bugs Bunny, looks like a big anvil. But really anywhere you go, there's great geology and rock formations, really on the east and the west side. Cave and Rock, which is a state park, which is down in the Ohio. It's an enormous cave that you can go in. That's a really cool place to check out also. I'm going to tout not just Forest Service, gotta share with everybody. There's just so much to do here in Southern Illinois. I can't say enough.
All right, well, in that case, once again, the Orland Park Library thanks Linda for doing this presentation. Thank you to the Shawnee National Forest. And everyone look out for the upcoming bookmarks and maps that will be handed out. So thank you, everyone, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.